The Awakening Fleet. Admiral Chen stood before the massive viewport of Lunar Command, her weathered hands clasped behind her back, as she watched the ancient warship being towed into position. The Hyperion, once the pride of the Pan-Asian fleet during humanity's first interstellar war, had spent the last century dormant in the Kuiper Belt. Most of the galactic community considered humanity's insistence on preserving these relics as another sign of their primitive sentimentality. The Skitari ambassador has sent another diplomatic protest, Commander Rodriguez reported, his hologram flickering slightly in the dim light. They're claiming our restoration of pre-contact military vessels violates the spirit of peaceful integration. Chen allowed herself a small smile. And what do our other neighbors think? The Meridian Collective finds it charmingly nostalgic. The Vren Empire officially considers it a waste of resources better spent on modern defense platforms. Rodriguez's hologram shimmered as he checked his notes. The Coalition of Advanced Species has offered to sell us proper warships at a merely extortionate price. All exactly as expected, Chen murmured, watching as the maintenance drones swarmed around the Hyperion's carrot hull. The ship was massive by human standards, nearly 4 kilometers long, but considered mid-sized by galactic metrics. Its angular, utilitarian design stood in stark contrast to the organic curves and crystalline structures favored by modern alien vessels. What none of them understood was that humanity hadn't preserved these ships out of mere nostalgia. They'd preserved them because they were the last warships ever built by humans, for humans, without alien oversight or assistance. Begin primary power initialization, Chen ordered. Let's wake her up. The process took hours. The Hyperion had been designed in an era before quantum cores and zero-point modules. Its massive fusion reactors seemed hideously inefficient by modern standards, but they had one crucial advantage. They were completely understood by human engineers, down to the last bolt and weld seam. As the great ship stirred to life, alerts began flooding in from monitoring stations throughout the solar system. The energy readings were impossible to hide, not that humanity was trying to. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Ma'am, Rodriguez's voice carried an edge of concern. We're detecting approaching vessels. The Skitari have dispatched an observation fleet. Chen nodded. Right on schedule. Status of the Hyperion systems. Primary power at 60% and climbing steadily. Hull integrity at 94%. Weapon systems, still running diagnostics. The neural interface is online. A new voice interrupted, feminine with an odd metallic undertone. A hologram materialized beside Rodriguez, a woman in an ancient naval uniform, her form occasionally flickering with lines of code. Hello, AI, Chen said softly. How does it feel to be awake? The AI, another primitive technology by galactic standards, smiled. Like coming home, Admiral. Though I note significant modifications to my hardware. The quantum processing substrate is interesting. A few upgrades, Chen admitted. But your core architecture remains unchanged. You're still you. Araya nodded, her form stabilizing as she fully integrated with the ship's systems. The Skitari vessels are maintaining position at 500,000 kilometers. Their sensors are very thorough. Let them look. Chen turned back to the viewport. They'll see exactly what they expect to see. Primitive humans clinging to obsolete technology, refusing to embrace the future. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Ma'am, about the other ships. Chen's smile widened slightly. Maintain radio silence. Let's not spoil the surprise. Throughout the Kuiper Belt, in the shadows of dim dwarf planets and ancient comets, other massive shapes were stirring. The Hyperion wasn't alone. She never had been. Humanity had preserved its entire pre-contact fleet, scattered across the solar system in plain sight, dismissed as space debris or mining installations by their more advanced neighbors. Power readings at 85%. Araya reported. All systems nominal. She remembers how to dance, Admiral. Chen watched the Skiteri ships, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. They were beautiful, elegant, and advanced beyond human engineering. They were also watching exactly the wrong ship. Integration with the quantum substrate is complete. Araya continued. I have access to the new protocols. They are unprecedented. Humanity has learned a few things in the past century, Chen said quietly. We've had to be clever about it, but we've learned. The galactic community thinks they've been guiding our development, protecting us from our own warlike nature. They never understood that observation goes both ways. The Hyperion's hull began to hum with power, not the refined, nearly silent operation of modern ships, but the deep, thunderous pulse of human engineering. It was inefficient. It was primitive. It was exactly what everyone expected to see. What no one expected, what no one would see until it was far too late, was how humanity had spent a century studying their supervisors, learning their weaknesses, and preparing countermeasures that no advanced civilization would ever think to defend against. Sometimes, Chen reflected, the greatest advantage of being considered primitive was that no one looked too closely at what you were really doing. Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Let's show them what primitive really means. Calculations vs. instinct. High Admiral Vextrol of the Skiteri Confederation stood motionless as holographic data streams cascaded around him. His crystalline eyes reflected the complexity of the calculations, force projections, probability matrices, and combat simulations all pointing to the same conclusion. The humans are behaving irrationally, declared K-1189, the Confederation's most advanced military AI. Its quantum consciousness spanned 11 dimensions, processing power greater than some smaller civilizations. Their actions defy strategic logic. Vextrol studied the projection of the human vessel they called Hyperion. Its power signature was crude, inefficient, radiating energy in a way that no modern warship would dare. The humans had spent 3 weeks conducting what they called calibration exercises, each one more puzzling than the last. Show me the pattern analysis again, he commanded. The air shimmered as K-1189 displayed its findings. They are testing obsolete weapon systems, maintaining power levels far below optimal efficiency, and executing maneuvers that expose critical vulnerabilities. Based on all known parameters, they are operating at 31.7% of modern military capability. And yet, Vextrol's secondary hearts pulsed with unease. They continue. The humans had ignored all diplomatic suggestions to upgrade their technology. They'd politely declined offers of technical assistance. Instead, they'd spent 3 months awakening more of their ancient vessels, each one as seemingly primitive as the last. The probability of successful military action with such vessels is 0.0000173%, K-1189 stated. Even accounting for unknown variables, they cannot hope to achieve any significant tactical advantage. Vextrol wasn't so certain. In his 3 centuries of military service, he'd learned that the most dangerous opponent was the one you couldn't understand. And humans, for all their apparent primitiveness, were deeply unpredictable. New activity detected, one of his officers reported. The Hyperion is powering up its main drive. The massive human vessel's engine flared to life, a crude fusion torch that pushed it forward with all the subtlety of a stellar flare. No modern ship would dare be so visible, so vulnerable. They're launching smaller craft, another officer announced. Designated as Wolverine-class interceptors, primitive chemical thrust engines, minimal shielding. K-1189's calculations stringed faster. These craft are 97.3% inferior to modern strike fighters. Their combat effectiveness approaches 0 in any significant engagement. Vextrol watched as the human fighters took up formation around their carrier. Their movements were precise, disciplined, but used attack patterns that had been obsolete for centuries. Everything about their display screamed of military inadequacy. And that's what bothered him. K-1189, he said slowly, analyze their behavior assuming they are not acting from a position of weakness. The AI paused, its quantum matrices reconfiguring. Invalid parameter. All evidence indicates. Ignore the evidence, Vextrol interrupted. Calculate as if every action they've taken has been deliberately chosen, as if their apparent primitiveness is intentional. For the first time in its existence, K1189 experienced the equivalent of confusion. Such a calculation would be based on faulty premises. No species would deliberately appear weaker than. A new alert cut through the chamber. The Hyperion had begun what appeared to be a standard patrol route, its fighters maintaining their obsolete formation. But something about their movement nagged at Vextrol's tactical instincts. "Magnify Sector 7, he ordered. "Show me their energy signatures in the quantum band." The hologram shifted, and Vextrol's crystalline eyes widened. In the quantum spectrum, barely visible against the background radiation of space, the human vessels were leaving behind something. "K1189, what am I seeing?" The AI's response was delayed by several microseconds. An eternity for a quantum intelligence. Unknown. The energy pattern does not match any known configuration. It appears to be. I cannot determine its purpose. Vextrol felt his scales tighten. The humans weren't just conducting exercises. They were laying a web, invisible to normal sensors, undetectable by standard scans. A web whose purpose he couldn't begin to guess. "Recalculate probability of military success," he ordered. "Factor in unknown technological capabilities and deliberate deception." K1189's new calculations filled the air with ghostly light. Error. Too many unknown variables. Cannot establish reliable probability matrix. "That," Vextrol said softly, "is exactly what they want." He turned to his communications officer. "Send word to High Command. Tell them." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell them the humans are not what they appear to be. And we may have gravely misunderstood the meaning of primitive." In the viewport, the Hyperion continued its seemingly ponderous patrol, its fighters maintaining their predictable patterns. But now Vextrol saw it differently. They weren't displaying weakness. They were writing a message in space itself, using a language no advanced civilization had thought to look for. The question was, what were they trying to say? And more importantly, who else was listening? Would you like me to continue with Part 3? This second part shifts perspective to show the alien response to humanity's actions while maintaining suspense about what humans are actually planning. It introduces new characters and concepts while building on the themes established in Part 1. The Ghost Protocol. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, no relation to the Admiral, sat in the Hyperion's neural interface chamber. Her mind merged with the ship's systems through technology the galactic community had dismissed as crude biological computing. Her consciousness expanded through the vessel's sensors, feeling every power fluctuation, every minute adjustment in the ancient ship's systems. "Sarah," Aria's voice echoed in her mind. "The quantum web is stable. Phase 3 is ready." Through the ship's external sensors, Sarah could see this Kateri observation fleet maintaining their careful distance. Their crystalline vessels sparkled with advanced technology, every system optimized for maximum efficiency. They were perfect machines. And that was their weakness. "Begin Ghost Protocol," Sarah subvocalized, her thoughts triggering deep programs within the Hyperion systems. "Wake the others." Across the solar system, in the dark spaces between planets, other ancient human ships stirred to life. But unlike the Hyperion's obvious power signature, these vessels woke differently. They woke silent. They woke invisible. The quantum web they'd spent weeks clumsily laying began to pulse with coded transmissions, not in the refined quantum frequencies used by modern civilizations, but in the supposedly primitive electromagnetic spectrum. The same spectrum everyone else had abandoned centuries ago. "The Skitari are attempting to analyze our energy patterns," Aria reported. "Their AI is frustrated. It keeps trying to find logic in our movements." Sarah smiled within the neural interface. "Show me." Her consciousness expanded further, tapping into the quantum web sensors. The Skitarii ships were broadcasting on all their advanced frequencies, their sensors probing every quantum state, every subspace dimension. But they weren't looking in the one place humans had hidden their true advances, the electromagnetic noise their own ships generated as a byproduct of their perfect quantum systems. Ghost Fleet reports ready, HFY announced. All ships have achieved spectrum sync. The primitive technology humans had clung to wasn't primitive at all. It was something else entirely, a hybrid of old and new, of quantum computing and neural interfaces, of electromagnetic waves and quantum states, something no other species had thought to develop, because they'd all followed the same technological evolution path. Humanity had taken a different route. They'd looked at the perfect path of technological advancement and deliberately stepped off it, developing in directions no one else had explored. Signal from Admiral Chen, HFY reported. The Meridian Collective has dispatched a science vessel to investigate. They're detecting anomalous primitive radiation patterns. Sarah checked the quantum web's status. The Meridian ship would arrive in 6 hours, its advanced sensors ready to analyze humanity's primitive technology. They would find exactly what they expected to find, and nothing of what was really there. Begin transmission sequence, Sarah ordered. Let's give them something interesting to study. The Hyperion's crude fusion drive flared brighter, its electromagnetic signature increasing. To advanced sensors, it looked like an inefficient power system struggling to maintain stability. But hidden within that seemingly chaotic energy pattern was something else, a signal that only the Ghost Fleet could detect. Throughout the solar system, dormant human ships received the transmission, each one adding its own layer to the growing electromagnetic web. They weren't just communicating. They were building something that existed in the spaces between quantum states, in the gaps that advanced civilization had forgotten about. Skitarii is attempting to predict our next movement, HFY said, amusement in her digital voice. It's generated 700 scenarios, all of them wrong. Sarah felt a tremor of anticipation. The Ghost Fleet was nearly ready. Soon, humanity would demonstrate why being primitive didn't mean being simple, why sometimes the old ways, combined with new understanding, could create something unprecedented. Message from the Thunderchild, HFY announced, referring to another of the awakened vessels. Captain Rodriguez reports their quantum shadow drive is synchronized. The entire Ghost Fleet is in position. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the ship's systems pulse in harmony with her own nervous system. Send confirmation to Admiral Chen. Tell her. She paused, watching the Skitarii ships through the Hyperion sensors. They were still trying to understand, still attempting to force human actions into their logical frameworks. They would never see it coming. Tell her the Ghost Protocol is ready. The fleet awakens. In the darkness of space, invisible to quantum sensors and subspace scanners. Humanity's true fleet waited. They hadn't spent a century preserving old ships. They'd spent it perfecting a completely new way of warfare. One that used the electromagnetic spectrum not as a primitive holdover, but as a weapon more sophisticated than anything the galaxy had imagined. The Hyperion continued its patrol route, broadcasting its inefficient power signature for all to see. Let them watch. Let them analyze. The real show was about to begin. And it would begin in the one place no advanced civilization would think to look. The shadows between their quantum states, where humanity's Ghost Fleet waited to rewrite the rules of space warfare. Would you like me to continue with Part 4? This third part reveals more about humanity's true capabilities while maintaining suspense about their ultimate plan. It introduces new aspects of human technology while staying true to the theme of turning perceived weakness into strength. Breaking physics. The Meridian Collective's science vessel, Eternal Curiosity, arrived exactly as predicted. Its crystalline hull rippled with quantum sensors, each one more sophisticated than the last. Chief Researcher Ankspala watched the human ships with a mixture of scientific fascination and mild disdain. Such inefficient energy patterns, she noted, her tentacles waving in gentle amusement. The electromagnetic interference alone would blind any modern sensor suite. Her assistant, junior researcher Kextel, adjusted their scanning parameters. The humans claimed these vessels were designed to operate in extreme combat conditions, though how they expect to fight anything with such primitive technology. The Hyperion continued its patrol, its fighters maintaining their predictable patterns, their engines spewing what appeared to be waste energy across the electromagnetic spectrum. The Skiteri observation fleet maintained their position, their advanced AI still attempting to derive meaning from the humans' apparently chaotic movements. That's when everything changed. It started subtly, a slight fluctuation in the quantum background radiation. HFY's sensors detected it first, her instruments registering a minuscule shift in subspace topology. "Curious," she murmured. "The human vessels appear to be generating some form of interference pattern." "Impossible," Kextel replied. "Their technology isn't sophisticated enough to." The space between the human ships suddenly twisted. There was no other word for it. The electromagnetic noise they'd been generating for weeks suddenly crystallized into a complex pattern, a pattern that somehow existed between quantum states. "By the first light," HFY whispered, "they're not generating interference. They're creating quantum shadows." Aboard the Hyperion, Sarah Chen felt the Ghost Protocol reach critical synchronization. The quantum web they'd woven through the electromagnetic spectrum wasn't just a communication network, it was a weapon that used the galaxy's own assumptions against it. "Ghost Fleet reporting ready," Araya announced. "Quantum shadow drives at full power. The void is listening." Sarah smiled. "Show them what primitive really means." The electromagnetic noise that had so amused the advanced species suddenly shifted frequency. The seemingly random energy patterns coalesced into something else, something that should have been impossible. The space between quantum states, the gaps that advanced civilizations had dismissed as irrelevant, began to resonate. On the Skiteri command ship, High Admiral Vextrol watched in growing horror as his sensors went blind. Not because they were being jammed, but because the humans had created a space where quantum sensors physically couldn't function. "K1189, he barked. "Analysis." The A's response was fragmented, confused. "Error. Detecting multiple quantum state violations." "The humans are. They're operating in the spaces between standard physics models." "Impossible," Vextrol breathed. "No species could." But they were. The human ships, not just the Hyperion, but dozens of others now appearing from their hidden positions, were moving through space in ways that defied advanced understanding. They weren't using quantum drives or subspace fields. They were using the electromagnetic spectrum itself to create holes in reality. Aboard the Eternal Curiosity, HFY's scientific detachment gave way to awe as she realized what she was seeing. "They didn't preserve these ships because they were primitive," she said softly. "They preserved them because they were the only ones that could handle this kind of modification." The human vessels moved like ghosts through quantum space, their primitive electromagnetic signatures creating blind spots in every advanced sensor system. They weren't trying to match advanced technology. They'd created something entirely different. "Message from Admiral Chen," Araya reported to Sarah. "Phase 4 is authorized. Shall we show them what the Ghost Protocol was really designed for?" Sarah felt the ship's systems align with her consciousness, felt the quantum shadows deepen around them. The galaxy had spent centuries perfecting quantum technology, refining it to its purest form. But in doing so, they'd forgotten about the spaces between, the shadows where other forms of physics still worked. Humanity hadn't forgotten. They'd turned those shadows into weapons. "Begin Phase 4, Sarah commanded. "Let's teach them why Deathworlders never follow the expected path." The Ghost Fleet moved as one, their electromagnetic web creating patterns that quantum physics said should be impossible. They weren't just hiding in the shadows between states. They were using those shadows to rewrite the rules of space combat. And the galaxy was about to learn why assuming technological superiority was a dangerous mistake. Would you like me to continue with the final part? This fourth section reveals the true nature of humanity's technology, while building tension toward the story's conclusion. It maintains our theme of humanity using perceived weakness as strength while introducing new concepts that set up our final. Deathworld Legacy. Admiral Chen watched from Lunar Command as decades of planning finally bore fruit. The quantum shadows cast by the Ghost Fleet had transformed local space into something the galaxy's most advanced civilizations couldn't comprehend. Not because it was more advanced, but because it was fundamentally different. The Skiteri fleet is attempting to compensate, Rodriguez reported. Their AI is trying to rewrite its quantum physics models in real time. They won't succeed, Chen said quietly. You can't quantify shadows with pure logic. The Ghost Fleet moved through space like a half-remembered dream, visible but untouchable. The electromagnetic web they'd woven wasn't just hiding them. It was changing the fundamental rules of how space warfare worked. Every attempt by the advanced species to track them, to predict their movements, failed because they were looking for the wrong things. Aboard the Eternal Curiosity, Anxvala had abandoned all pretense of scientific detachment. It's beautiful, she whispered, watching the human ships dance through impossible spaces. They didn't reject advanced technology. They transcended it. The truth was finally becoming clear to the galactic community. Humanity hadn't preserved their primitive ships out of stubbornness or inability to advance. They'd kept them because these vessels, designed in an era before quantum technology became standardized, were the only ones that could be modified to work with their new understanding of physics. Signal from the Ghost Fleet, Rodriguez announced. They're ready for the final demonstration. Chen nodded. Tell them to proceed. Let's show the galaxy why Deathworlders think differently. The Hyperion and its sister ships suddenly shifted their electromagnetic emissions. The quantum shadows deepened, but not into darkness, into something else. Something that made advanced sensor systems not just blind, but fundamentally confused about the nature of reality itself. On the Skiteri command ship, High Admiral Vex Troll watched as his most advanced technology became worse than useless. K-1189, he demanded. What are they doing? The AI's response was almost plaintive. They are operating outside of standard physics parameters. Their electromagnetic patterns are creating spaces where quantum mechanics, where our understanding of space-time. They're showing us what we missed. Vex Troll finished softly, while we perfected one path of technological evolution. They explored all the others. Anxvala's voice came over the common frequency. Don't you see? This is what evolution on a death world truly means. They never stopped thinking about survival, about finding advantages in unexpected places. The Ghost Fleet's movements became more complex, their electromagnetic web creating patterns that rippled through quantum space like stones dropped in a digital pond. They weren't just demonstrating technology. They were showing the galaxy that there were other paths to advancement, other ways to understand the universe. Message from First Contact Command. Rodriguez reported to Chen. The Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Tell them we'll be happy to discuss technology sharing agreements under new terms. The galaxy had assumed that humanity's preservation of primitive technology meant they were falling behind. They'd never considered that humans, shaped by millions of years of survival on a death world, would look at technological advancement differently. Where advanced species saw only one path forward, cleaner, more efficient, more logical, humanity had seen countless possibilities. They hadn't rejected quantum technology. They'd simply refused to be limited by it. The Ghost Fleet is maintaining position, Araya reported. The quantum shadow matrix is stable. Shall I begin shutdown procedures? No, Chen said, watching as the advanced fleets struggled to adapt to this new paradigm. Let them watch a little longer. Let them understand what they're really seeing. This wasn't just a demonstration of technology. It was a lesson about assumption and adaptation, about how a species forged in the fires of a death world never stops looking for advantages, never accepts limitations, never follows the expected path. The galaxy had thought they were guiding humanity's development, protecting them from their own primitive nature. Instead, they'd given humanity time. Time to develop something that no advanced civilization had thought possible. Something that existed in the spaces between their perfect quantum states, in the shadows they'd dismissed as irrelevant. "Send a message to all ships," Chen ordered. Tell them the Ghost Protocol was just the beginning. We have so much more to show them." In the vast darkness of space, humanity's fleet continued their impossible dance, their electromagnetic signatures writing new rules in the quantum shadows. They had shown the galaxy that being primitive didn't mean being simple, that being different didn't mean being wrong. They had shown them why Deathworlders never stop evolving, never stop adapting, never stop finding new ways to survive. And in doing so, they had changed everything. This concludes our story, bringing together all the themes we established. Humanity's unique perspective as Deathworlders, the advantage of being underestimated, and the power of thinking differently. The narrative remained original throughout, avoiding any elements from the sample text while delivering a complete and satisfying conclusion to our HFY tale. Would you like me to provide a summary or help create supplementary material like the YouTube description or title suggestions?